Welcome to Church Online. This morning I'm going to tell you a story. It's called Hold the Cake. It all happened on a Sunday morning. Our family was on our way to church, and it was a special day. It was a potluck Sunday. So potlucks is where everybody gets together different dishes and they take them to the church, and then after we have this big feast. So I was bringing a bag full of peanut butter and banana sandwiches because peanut butter was still allowed in social places then, and I was bringing a cake. So I get into the Jeep and I put the cake up on the dashboard, and the sandwiches are sitting on my lap, and we're driving down our country road. And my husband says, "Hold the cake." And I'm like, well, no, the cake is sitting on the dashboard. It's fine. Nothing's going to happen. I'm going to leave it sitting there. And I just kind of say, no, that's okay. I'm going to leave it. And he doesn't explain himself at all. He just says, "Hold the cake." So I'm like, okay, I don't really like to be told what to do. Like if somebody asks me to do something, like with a please, and yeah, sure, whatever, I'll do it for you. But if someone's in the habit of telling me what to do, then I'm sometimes in the habit of saying no. But I'm working on that. Don't worry, I'm working on that. So this cake is sitting on the dashboard, and my husband says, "Hold the cake." And I say no. And he repeats himself again, "Hold the cake." And so I take the cake with as much attitude as I can muster up. I take it, I put it in the palm of my hand, and I hold it up here like this. And I say, okay, fine, I'm holding the cake. And all he says is 2 hands. So I take my other hand, with one finger, I put it on the side of the cake, and I say, I'm holding the cake. Now it turns out that there's this spot on the road, there's a spot on the road, right in front of where we're driving. And sometimes it's flat, but sometimes there's a giant bump in the road. Now Tim has been down the road several times, and he knows that this seasonal bump is back, and therefore he said, "Hold the cake." And we hit that bump, and the peanut butter and jam sandwiches went flying, and the cake went flying, and the sandwiches ended up on the floor, and Tim reaches over and he saves the cake. I couldn't save the cake with my one finger that I was using to hold it. There was no way I was going to rescue the cake, but I didn't know. I didn't know that there was going to be a bump in the road. No one told me there was going to be a bump in the road. They just said, "Hold the cake." If I would have known what was coming, I would have held the cake. I didn't know that there was going to be that bump in the road. I could not see the big picture. And this is what happens in life sometimes. We can't see the big picture. In fact, most of the time, we can't see the big picture. But we need to have faith that God is in control. We can't see the big picture. We don't know what's going to happen next, but God does. And we need to have faith. We need to be living our life for God and following God, even though we don't know what's going to happen, how things are going to turn out, what the end result looks like, what the big picture is. The Bible says that faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. It's found in Hebrews 11, verse 1. And another version says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Let's take a look at a man named Joshua. The Bible gives us an account of Joshua's great victory over a city called Jericho. This story is a prime example of having faith in God, following his instructions, knowing he's in control, and doing what he asks even when we don't see the big picture. God's people had just escaped bondage in Egypt. They were slaves, but they had been set free by God, and they were on their way into this new land that God had promised them. But in order to take possession of the new land, there were battles that they had to fight along the way. And one of the cities that they needed to conquer was Jericho. And this is how it went down. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all of your armed men. Do this for 6 days. have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound the long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the walls of the city will collapse, and the army will go up, everyone straight in. Now, if I was Joshua, I would have needed a little bit of time to process this. So you want us to do what? And how is that going to work? So we just walk every day around the city, and then the walls are going to fall down? Okay, yep, okay. See, Joshua might have had some questions, because this is way outside the realms of normal military procedure. There's a huge possibility that inside his head, he was saying, I don't get it. I can just imagine how this conversation goes. Joshua is standing at the wall of Jericho, and God says, see, I have given you Jericho and its king and its fighting men. And Joshua looks at the wall, and he must have thought something like, maybe I need glasses because I still see a wall. The walls of Jericho were between 1.5 and 2 meters thick and between 12 and 17 feet high. And Joshua sees that wall. And the king and the army of Jericho are still on the other side of that wall. But God says, I have delivered Jericho into your hands. Well, the wall is still standing and the army of Jericho is undefeated because God sees the big picture. How many of us can say this today? That when we are facing our own wall in life, when we feel like we are in a battle, do we say, I don't understand what's happening right now. I don't know what God is doing behind the scenes. I'm missing some of the pieces of the big picture, but I am going to put my faith in God and I'm going to continue to follow him. God gave Joshua some really random instructions for battle, like really strange details on how to take out the enemy. He told Joshua, you have to take this army and march around the city once a day for 6 days. And while they're marching, they're supposed to play trumpets, and the priests are told to carry the Ark of the Covenant around the city with them. And on the 7th day, they are told to march around the walls of Jericho 7 times. And on the 7th time around the city, to blast the horn, to blast the trumpet, to make a sound and shout. And this is what they do. Those first 6 nights must have been really hard, sitting and waiting to see the end result. These guys, they were soldiers. A lot of people picture the Israelite army like an untrained ex-slaves with torn t-shirts that are throwing rocks at the enemy. But warfare history says that the Israelite army was a large force led by experienced commanders, and that they had weapons that would be found in the Egyptian armies or any other army of the times. If they were going to take out a city, they were ready to do it by power and by might and with intense bravery, not by sitting around a campfire, waiting for sunset, waiting for sunrise so that they could walk around the city. But sometimes following God, even in the midst of battle, means being still and waiting and knowing that he is working behind the scenes. I was out for a walk on our back road the other day, and everything was so quiet, so still. It just felt like, for that second, that everything had stopped. And as I walked along a little further, I started to hear running water. And it got louder and louder, and I realized that even though the scenery was motionless, and it seemed like nothing was happening, that really, right there, under the snowbank, in the deep ditch right beside where I was this rushing water. The flooded fields were drained, and the fast-moving water was flowing right past me the whole time. I couldn't hear it, I couldn't see it, until I came to an opening in the snowbank, but something was happening all along. I couldn't see the big picture. Sometimes in life, we may feel that God isn't doing anything. We don't see him moving. We don't see things changing. We don't have all of the pieces of the big picture. And maybe that's what the Israelite army felt like. They had marched that day, but nothing happened. Day 2, nothing happens. Day 5, the walls weren't coming down, but they were faithful and they continued to put their trust in God. And on that last day, in verse 15 and verse 16, this is what it says. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner. Except on that day, they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priests sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And in verse 20, it says, when the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed. So everyone charged straight in, and they took the city. Now, how did that happen? We don't know. Did the marching of the army around the city wall every day shake the foundation until it couldn't take it anymore? Were there small cracks in the wall, and the vibration of the trumpet sounds forced the cracks to expand until they couldn't support the weight of the wall? Did the Spirit of God become like a spiritual whirlwind as they marched around the city, like when you go in a round pool and you walk and the whirlwind fills the pool? Did that bring down the walls of Jericho? Did God just knock down the walls, just knock them down because his people trusted him? Even though they couldn't see what was going on behind the scenes, they couldn't see the big picture, they still put their faith in him. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians 5 verse 7 that we are to live by faith and not by sight. There's this song that we sing in church. A lot of churches use it as a praise and worship song. It's called Waymaker. And it talks about who God is. And the bridge of this song is so powerful. It just says over and over again, even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. And that is how it is with God. We may not see what God is doing behind the scenes, but he is doing something. And when we don't understand what's happening, when we're missing pieces of the big picture, we need to put our faith in God and continue to follow him.